People get bored when they're not challenged, regardless of who they are. And I think it's just about understanding the person and how to create challenges for them. This is regardless of its general population or its bodybuilding, just setting challenges for them that are slightly above where they're currently at.
Welcome everybody to a new episode with Astrid, your APD, your dietitian with T, no C, and I am here with my friend Richard, who is an amazing expert and a contest prep bodybuilding coach, and also much more than we will have to speak with him and discover because he's got more things under his hat. Now, let's talk about you. And Richard, welcome to the show. Talk to me a bit about your story, why you do what you do, and what is the main thing that attracted you to do what you do?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be on. I think this is going to be a nice, fun conversation and a very long time coming. About me. So essentially, coaching is the only job I've ever done in my entire life. I've never had another job. So there's a first fun fact. So it's really the only thing that I know how to do to a decent level. When I was in high school and just out of high school, I played a very high level of basketball. I had been doing strength and conditioning work from about 15 to about 19 or 20. I really enjoyed it. And when I was finishing school, it was just something that I wanted to get into. And also with my basketball career sort of wrapping up, I still wanted to stay within the sport. And I thought that was a really good way for me to do it. So essentially, when I first started, I actually started by doing a advanced diploma in sports development, which was not just strength conditioning, but also just player management, and almost it was for being an agent for a professional sports player as well as the strength and conditioning side. And I did that for a pretty long period of time in the private sector, and I got to be able to work with some professional sports teams in Melbourne, which was amazing. And I think I sort of moved over to a public sector gym, so a commercial gym. I started obviously working with the demographic that was there, which was general population, and I spent a few years doing that. And then I had somebody come in that wanted to do bodybuilding coaching. I didn't know a great deal of what I was doing. Look back on it, and what I did was horrendous. However, they still managed to actually win the show that they were in. And you know how it is with bodybuilding, when you have a client or two that do really well, you generally tend to have referrals and have people that want to do the show with you. So I ended up taking on a few more bodybuilding clients that also did well. And obviously, I always sort of say with coaching is being a problem solver. So for me, I was continuing to learn sort of on the job, speaking with experts in the field at that time and learning and continuing my education based around body composition because my obviously my demographic for general population and bodybuilding was growing pretty rapidly. So I ended up sort of falling into bodybuilding and body composition. And I think I sort of just became an expert on it over the years just by, problem solving for clients and just working out, okay, they have this issue. How can I fix that? Or, I need to get people leaner. I need to learn more within nutrition, or I need to learn more within training, or any of those sort of things. And fast forward, I think it's 21 years now. I've put, I would say, probably 400 or 500 people on stage. I still work with a handful of professional sports athletes in the gym from a private level, not for the actual clubs, but working with them one-on-one outside of their club work. And yeah, essentially that's led us to here where I have my own gym in Perth. And we've got 6 people working at the gym and yeah, that brings us to today.
That's awesome. Also, now I've heard that you are also a bodybuilding judge. How did you get to go from being a coach to decided to explore that area, and what attracted you to be in that realm of judging in bodybuilding?
Well, with judging, I essentially did it a long, long time ago, and I had gone through the training courses, and then obviously things like having a great eye for multiple divisions. When you've worked with multiple divisions, it's always a benefit for a judge rather than just being sort of an expert on a specific division as a coach or whatnot. So I had done it a long time ago. I would actually taken a break from it for, oh, I'm gonna say like 10 years. Uh,
Okay.
Obviously still very heavily in the bodybuilding world and up to date with all criterias and whatnot. And one of my very, very close friends, Joey Cantlin, is the head judge for ICN in India, who also works with ICN in Dubai and a few other countries. And he had said, I previously it's hard to judge when you have a lot of clients doing shows. So I don't obviously don't didn't have any clients over in India, and he sort of said, do you want to come over and jump on and do this? So recently, last year and this year, I've sort of jumped back into it, and doing a few trips to 3 or 4 trips to India for the year. We went to Dubai last year, and yeah, and back doing judging again, which is it's always so much fun, and it's great to be able to go to different countries and experience the differences in shows and meet and network with a bunch of people from different countries that have different experiences with bodybuilding and they can bring different lights to things. So it's been really fun. It's honestly like it's a really enjoyable thing for me to do. It teaches me a lot as a coach. And then obviously the judging side of things is just something that I just generally enjoy doing.
And yourself, have you ever competed in bodybuilding yourself, or what made you to upskill in that area mostly over doing other sort of coaching? Suppose like other types of coaching, like working with general population or working with athletes in a specific sport. You mentioned something about bodybuilding being something that kind of like life got you to pretty much do it, but how about your story? How about yourself and your fitness journey?
Yeah, so my own training. So I grew up from about 7 years old to about 25 playing basketball. I was playing essentially one league below the professional leagues here in Australia. So my personal sports background was more so from that regard.
Mm.
Bodybuilding, I'm the bodybuilding coach that hasn't competed in bodybuilding, funnily enough. My younger brother was a very, very high level bodybuilder. A lot of my friends growing up were competitive bodybuilders. So I've been around it for, a very, very long time. But for me personally, and I love everything about bodybuilding. Like for me, I enjoy, the changing body composition, how everything works, why it works, all of those sort of things absolutely fascinate me. But the actual tanning and getting on stage and posing is just not something that I personally would do. Like I still train with a lot of hypertrophy work, will have periods in my life where I will eat and train like a bodybuilder for sure. But from a personal level, like I think the tanning and posing and getting on stage, this isn't something that I personally want to do. But everything else that comes with it, I absolutely love it. So yeah, I am the bodybuilding coach that hasn't gotten on stage, but I also try to be proof to people that you hear that thrown around that it's like, you can't be a bodybuilding coach unless you've competed yourself. And while I do think there's some good merit to having experience, I sort of try to pave the way and be like, look, I think, when you're around it enough and you're good enough with people and you understand the sport, then it's definitely something you can coach without doing. Obviously there are benefits to doing it, but I also am somebody that, I think one of my strengths that I've been told previously from athletes is the fact that it's not like something where I'm myself driven into it. Whereas 100% of my effort is going towards athletes, which I think is also, a benefit in itself as well. But yeah, so my background, I've done a lot of different sports. I've done powerlifting, I've done strongman, I've gotten myself contest lean before. I've done a lot of those things, but predominantly it's been basketball. And then as a coach, it's been coaching sports athletes and coaching bodybuilders.
What is the one thing that you'd say about bodybuilding that has deterred you from competing?
I just don't want to put the tan on and get on stage and pose. There's not much. I always say that to people, and it's like there's not much more to it. Like I'm fascinated by the physical side of it. I'm also fascinated by the mental side of it because like mental performance in sport is something that I'm very, very big on and that I study. So a lot of that is absolutely fascinating. But just for me personally, like I just don't, I've never had a desire to Yeah, to just jump on stage and tan up and do the posing. Like it's just, something personally, it's just not for me, but everything that comes with it, like I completely understand it, respect it, absolutely everything in that regard. But it's just, I can train and diet and do everything that's required for the sport. I just don't personally haven't ever felt a want that was enough for me that would get me to go up and do it. I would say is probably the best way to say it. But yeah, everything that comes with the process of it, I absolutely love, and it's fascinating to me.
Do you think being a bodybuilding coach makes you a better or worse coach when it comes to your non-competitive clients? Why or why not?
Do I think being a non-competitor is better or worse?
Yeah, so being in a bodybuilding coach realms
Mhm.
makes you a better or worse coach when it comes to working with clients that are non-competitive.
That's a great question. It's pretty context driven. I don't think it makes me better, but I think I'm great at dealing with general population clients for other aspects. But I think one thing that it does help is like I think it's the context of how far you have to push things, like in terms of like obviously diet and training and what's your barrier entry, like for general population. If they miss a few workouts, it's not the end of the world. When they're going out for dinner and they're a little bit less flexible, it's about the whole picture a little bit more. We're not on time frames and things like that. Whereas with bodybuilding, it's a little bit stricter. And I think if you only coach with bodybuilders and you don't have that experience with the general population, sometimes it can be hard to, and it can be frustrating for people at times because as a bodybuilder, you can sort of be like, this is easy. This is what I enjoy doing. And it can sometimes be hard to relate to the general population that maybe don't like exercise and don't have as much value in nutrition as what you as the coach might. But I think I'm lucky in the way that I've had a really good blend of different demographics of athletes over time. So I think it being a specific only bodybuilding coach is a sport. So I think it is very different than dealing with the general population. But I think there's definitely crossovers. And I think if you are good at sort of separating, the not barriers of entry, but just sort of separating the expectations, I think they can definitely help each other. But I think at the same time, if you struggle with the fact that you're used to training people that maybe don't have to have habits built in already, because a lot of bodybuilders, obviously, they have to be done before you do a contest prep anyway. So I feel like with a lot of people, it can also be a hindrance if you're just sort of not used to dealing with people that maybe don't value health and fitness. They want the result, but they just don't have the habits built in. It can definitely be far tougher because you're having to deal with problems that maybe you haven't dealt with before, dealing with bodybuilders, and it can be a little bit agitating. But yeah, look, I think they can definitely complement each other, especially with training technique. You have to have quite a good base of nutrition, obviously, to do bodybuilding coaching, which parts of it can be applied to general population. So I think it's a little bit less with does this help this, and it's more about how good is your level of dealing with people, like how is your empathy and how is your ability to break complex topics down to a very simple and how to communicate that across to the general population to get them to understand and listen. And I think that's probably the biggest difference and the most important thing, that from a coach's point of view, that if you can do that quite well, even as a bodybuilding coach, then you'll be really successful with general population. But if you struggle and you can only sort of talk in bodybuilding terms and everything you have to relate to goes back to bodybuilding, then I think you may struggle with specific people in the general population for sure.
In your experience, or like if you were to describe me the biggest traits and what makes a client a good client, like you enjoy working with them and you like to see them through the entire journey, what makes a good client? Being like, this client is excellent, is the one who's gonna get results, is the one that I enjoy working with, is the one that is allowing to receive feedback, but at the same time is willing to put in the work. So like, just tell me more about what is that good client for you?
I think you nailed it right there. I think the number one thing is coachability.
Mm.
regardless of whether they're an Olympia level athlete or they've never been to the gym before. If an athlete is coachable, then you're going to be able to get great results with them. And then just sort of to elaborate on coachable, it's things that when I sort of am able to explain a concept to them, even if they don't understand it quite yet, or they're open to wanting to learn. And they may come in, and if it's a general population client, and have you done, every fad diet in the world, but aren't coming in to be sort of like, hey, this is what I did work, so this is what we need to do. I just want motivation. For me, if a client comes in and they're like, okay, what I've done hasn't worked before. So I'm literally going to be whatever you think is a great idea. I'm on board to do it, and I'm on board to learn. And I think those are the athletes that generally do quite well, that you can, sort of educate. They're, again, open to learning. They take on feedback really well. And then, yeah, so regardless of, what kind of athlete it is, or if it's just a sort of general population coming to the gym, when they're coachable, I think you can see absolutely amazing results with them. And then on top of that, process-driven athletes are 99% of the time going to be the athletes that you want to coach the most. The ones that are not just sort of heavily, heavily focused on the end goal, but they're interested and curious and excited to be able to see improvements every single week or learn how to do what they need to do, not just I want to lose 5 kilos and I'm going to be miserable until I see that number on the scale. It's going to be more of a I want to learn how you have to live your life to lose those 5 kilos, and what things that are required from me and what changes do I have to make. And I think as well that that's more so for that the onus of that also lies on the coach to be able to teach an athlete how to be process driven rather than outcome driven. So I think being coachable is a teachable skill. So I think it's kind of interesting that it's a good question, because I think what makes a great athlete is something that's also teachable.
Okay. I'm thinking now, when you think about you as a coach and as a judge, you have to sort of like define success. And for you, when it comes to defining success in bodybuilding, is it different or the same? What is for you the meaning of success in bodybuilding, and what makes it to be something that you is worth saying, hey, I've succeeded through this competition, through this first journey? What is that? What is that for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think as a coach, for me, it's helping an athlete. I always sort of say success is helping an athlete reach their full potential. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but not every athlete is built to be a pro athlete in reality. And especially the tougher the division or the federations are, the more muscular the federation, or the less muscular, sorry, the federations are, the more it relies on genetic structure and things like that. However, every single person can get better. So for me, like I look at it and it's, success is for first of all, success is bringing an athlete in improved from where they were previously is a success. And at the end of the day, I think success looks like helping an athlete reach their full potential, because I feel like there are some people that aren't maybe genetically structured to be a pro athlete in bodybuilding, and that's completely fine. So if you put the barrier of success on winning a pro card or winning the show, there are some people that may just not achieve that. So for me, I always try to pull things back into stuff that we can control, which is obviously reaching your own full potential. So success for me as a bodybuilding coach is helping athletes reach their full potential. And I think when we can, improve an athlete year by year, season by season, I look at that as successful. I don't necessarily look at, saying, oh, they came fourth and then they won the show, which is fantastic. We obviously want to do that. However, I think if the athlete, for me, if the athlete is improving year by year, show by show, and we're getting closer to making them as good as they can possibly be and get them as far as they possibly can, to me, that looks like success.
How many seasons do you think are needed for a competitor to achieve their maximum potential? Like in your experience across the different years and the different type of clients you've worked with, how many times or how many seasons they have had to go through in order to be the best version of themselves when they are deciding to compete once more?
So I tend to look at it. I don't think I've ever seen anyone yet hit their full potential. I think if we're capping that, then I think we're putting a limit on the athlete. But I think, for different people, it's always going to be different, right? Like I've seen some athletes come in their first year and win an IFBB Pro Card in their
Okay.
first season of competing. My client Kat, who just recently won her IFBB Pro Card in Japan, has been competing for 12 or 13 years, and she got her very first place in any division in NPC last season. She was always anywhere from 10th to third. I think third was her best spot, and then she ended up getting a first in a novice division, and then the next season after that she competed, she ended up winning a pro card. And we just constantly kept getting feedback from the judges, and then that was, we knew, okay, if we want to be better, then that's what we have to do. So we went back and we just continued to do that over and over and over and over again until we got to the point where she'd actually won an IFBB pro card in bikini. So I think it does really depend. Like you do see people that come in that are maybe can do it significantly faster, but then there's other people that it's going to take a really long time for. And that's why I sort of like to put make success a controllable factor for people, because obviously you can't control genetics, you can't control who turns up on the day, but you can control getting better. Regardless of whether you win or lose, the goal is always going to be to, take your feedback from the judges, learn what you have to do to get better. And then so for me, success is going to be something, I want success to be something that we can control. Because if I leave success into the hands of judges or who turns up on the day, then we can do everything absolutely amazing and still feel like a failure at the end of the season, which I don't necessarily agree with. So for me, I tend to try to pull it back onto controllable factors for us. And then the analogy that I always use for clients is that your bodybuilding career or your sports career is like a book, and every competition is just a chapter. So essentially, if you win a show, great. That's the end of the chapter. Now we have to move on to the next chapter, but the book's not done. The book is essentially going to be your career and reaching your full potential as an athlete.
What do you feel is the biggest reward for you in coaching?
Biggest reward for me. I think I was thinking about this. This question got brought up a few weeks ago, and I was sort of thinking about this. And I think one of the biggest rewards for me is seeing people excited about improvements that they didn't think they could make. And I look at, specific athletes, and I had somebody go to the IFBB posing workshop, and they said, wow, that was the first time I felt like I actually looked like a bikini athlete. Or, hey, I look really amazing next to these people. And those are the sort of things that are, they let me feel accomplished, because it's sort of, I get to go, look, you've just achieved something that, you've worked so hard for, and, you didn't think you were actually able to achieve. And for me, that's like a really good feeling for me. The thing I like about that is it stems across every single athlete, whether it's a bodybuilding show, whether it's a general population person, as you'd know, somebody that loses, 10 or 15 kilos that's tried for years. And, them trusting you to be part of the process, and you actually being able to help guide them in whatever way they need to get to a result is something special, which is, I'm sure, something that you would agree with as well.
What do you feel is the way you approach mindset and a client who is starting to work on their fitness journey, health journey, doesn't matter, but they have such a long way to go to get to the goal that they can't even visualize themselves achieving that. Maybe because of due past failures, or because it's so far away that it doesn't seem to be clear. Like when you do the exercise of visualizing yourself, let's say on stage, or becoming the best version of yourself 20, 25 kilos lighter. How do you work around the mindset in order for them to actually see it through? Like, can I actually visualize myself doing that if I've never been there before? How can I see it? Because sometimes, I mean, this is coming from like even my own experience when I did my first prep last year. When I started, I couldn't even see myself on stage. Like there was so many things I had to work through, and the person that I needed to become wasn't clear to me. Like I couldn't even imagine myself on a bikini. I couldn't see myself walking on a stage. I didn't even know how to pose. So it was like so many things that were kind of in the way that I needed to accomplish first before becoming that version of myself that stepped on stage. And it's incredible that as you get closer and closer, that blurry image is kind of like starting to get some clarity, and it feels like it's actually achievable. But when you start, it's so far away that it's so hard to visualize it. And obviously, to push drive and motivation and like continue to trust the process that you will actually get there is the scary part. So how do you manage that situation?
I think that's one of the most important parts of coaching is being able to keep people on track, especially over long-term goals. And I think one of the most important things here is, and it's not going to sound cliche, but proper goal setting. And I think everybody hears goal setting, but nobody does. I don't necessarily think people do it well. And I think, you're going to have outcome goals, which for you obviously would be getting on stage. But then, you're going to have process goals. So again, it's the whole short, medium, and long term. And I think a lot of coaches will have, or athletes as well, will have, long-term goals. And then, like you said, when it does feel like it's so far away and you can't envision even doing it, it's very easy to get lost in your own mindset and in your own thoughts and things like that. If I'm so far away, why am I doing this? And, so I think one of the most important things is breaking down the bigger goal into smaller goals. And, I think that's done probably not to the extent that it should be done. You'll see a lot of, times where people will be like, I know I have to do this dieting phase or I have to do this growth phase or whatever it is. But I think breaking things down to a daily level is very, very important because I think a lot of people, when they're struggling, they're just not having wins. So I think it's something where, as a coach, you want to try to find a win. The more wins you find for your athlete, the more the better they feel, the more excited they are, the more motivated they are. So if we can find ways to set up goals for them that create, more frequent wins, it keeps them more motivated. And I think that's where you put energy as a coach for the athlete is where their mind is going to go. So what I sort of like to do, especially with general population clients, is have daily goals. And again, I always sort of say, try to gamify what they're doing. So whether it's bodybuilding or whatever it is, I use something called a point system with general population clients, and it's called a 100-point tracker. And essentially, like daily lifestyle habits are worth certain points, and the negative habits are worth negative points. And I try to get them to, achieve 100 points every single day. So we're gamifying their lifestyle for them. And then when they achieve it, they feel great. And then when they don't achieve it, so it's pulling all of their short-term goals and creating wins out of them. And I think when you're able to do that with athletes, I think you're able to, or even, athletes or general pop. When I say athletes, I mean everybody. When you're able to do that with people, you can create more wins, create more motivation. And then when people feel like they're winning, they want to continue.
I love that. I love that approach.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit more about it. So you create like a point system
Mhm.
based on like particular goals. Are they all based on just habits or like a very individualized to-do list of things that they have to accomplish on a day-to-day basis? Like for some people, their tasks or the list of habits may look different from someone else.
Yeah.
So how do you use that point system, and how would you structure that based on your client? Like if he's a general lifestyle client versus a athlete that is going to compete.
Yeah, so I actually run it the very similar way. It'll just be the goals of the day are going to be a little bit different. I have a template that I use, and then I may just adjust the actual numbers around for different people. So for general population, it's going to be more about water intake. The most important lifestyle factors to help their goals are going to be worth the highest amount of points. And then the sort of smaller ones are going to be worth the negative. And then the most impactful will be negative. So for example, getting 8 hours of sleep will be worth could be worth 40 points. So if you get 8 hours of sleep, we're already, halfway done with the day because that's obviously, going to affect cravings and affect energy and all of those sort of things. So that one's quite important. Could be hitting a protein goal, obviously very important because we know like the carry on of that of it being very satiating and then, things like that. So I generally try to push the higher points towards things that are going to be more important for them achieving their goal. The things that I will change on it might be, if they work away in the mines and they may not be able to get 8 hours of sleep, I might adjust the time difference to something that can be better for them. For some people, it could be 10,000 steps. For some people, if they're only doing 2,000 steps in a day, I might start it at 5 or something like that. So I do make small adjustments, but they're just basic lifestyle habits. And just the idea is to try to get them to win that daily game as many times as possible. And at the
Uh,
end of the day, not doing anything else, if you're able to win that game more times in the week than you're not, for the majority of general population people, they're gonna see results. And that sort of just takes the mindset away from I'm trying to lose 10 kilos to being more process driven, which is gonna be, I'm trying to win this game today, right? I'm trying to make sure I'm gonna try to get 8 hours sleep because I want those 40 points. I'm gonna try to drinking 2.5 liters of water, I can do that at work, and then they feel really good. They feel excited when they win. And then it's going to be about stringing as many of those together, and you can tailor them to be more or less over time. But it's just about people get bored when they're not challenged, regardless of who they are. And I think it's just about, understanding the person and how to create challenges for them. This is regardless of its general population or its bodybuilding. Just setting challenges for them that are slightly above where they're currently at. Things that they can achieve, but just finding ways to get them to be motivated to do it and sort of put their mindset on the process of what they're doing rather than because if your goal is to get on stage, but it's a 2-year goal, if you don't set proper goals, then you're going to feel like a failure for 2 years until you actually do it. And, most people aren't going to stick to that. And it's the same thing with the general population athlete who has to lose 25 kilos, right? If you don't set goals for them, they're going to go, oh, it's 25. I feel like a failure until I lose 25 kilos, which could be a long time. So being able to gamify things on a daily basis for them creates wins. When they have wins, they have dopamine, they're excited, then they want to continue to go. And then it sort of removes things from, like I said, you might have a goal weight of 5 kilos first and then set the points tracker for the daily. And then, they may just try to win the daily as much as they possibly can. And they'll get to the 5 kilos and they'll go, oh shit, let's go to 10. And, so that's just sort of how we can set up the short, medium, and long-term goals, which I think is in the fitness industry, maybe not done as well as it could be done. And I think, there's many ways to do it, but the tracker is the one that everybody loves. So I think that's the one I usually tend to go through. But I think goal setting in the regard to go back to your question about becoming the person that you have to become to get on stage or lose 20 kilos or whatever it is, it's about gamifying and creating wins out of the lifestyle so that you can become that person and make wins to become essentially the person that needs to get on stage so you can sort of teach the athlete this is what it takes on a daily basis to be a bodybuilder. And I think that's kind of lost. So I think when you do that at a high level and you have the ability to get clients bought into those daily goals at a high level, it essentially just becomes a matter of time till they are the person that they need to be, even if they don't look like it just yet. They're becoming the person that is 20 kilos lighter, or they're becoming the athlete that is on stage.
I like the point because, like you said, it's motivating to work towards something that at the end of the day you really want to get the biggest amount of points. Are these more like things that you kind of like put a value yourself, like depending on how important that goal is for the person? Because, for example, if we're thinking about someone who is an entrepreneur, a business person, and they really want to lose 25 kilos, but their lifestyle is challenging already as it is. For them, maybe just getting 8 hours of sleep is much more important than, I don't know, drink the 8 glasses of water
Mm.
versus someone else like a athlete that is really put or neglecting their hydration could be impacting their performance, and they might get good amount of sleep according to their history, but not so much other habits that they probably are putting at risk. So is it something that do you assign the points based on how important are they for that specific client, or is it very arbitrary, or is like you have created a system that this specific habit has this amount of points?
I have adjusted it around a little bit and created higher points for people that maybe have areas that they really do need to work on to get to their full potential. So I have definitely done that before where I've reallocated the points. But for more than general, when you're looking at people's lifestyles, like sleep is such an underrated performance booster. And for me, like sleep, I always will generally always push that up to the top. But if there's something like steps that nobody has and he doesn't like the athlete doesn't have an issue with, then but water is something that they do, there's absolutely no reason why I couldn't very easily just adjust those around. For the majority of people, it'll be highest priority to help them get to their potential. But again, for most general population, it's relatively the same thing in terms of the points. But, if there are specific cases where there's somebody that, is a trades worker and they're doing 12,000 steps a day just at work, obviously, but they're not drinking water at work and they're outside in the heat all day, then yeah, there's definitely merit to adjusting those around. I probably haven't done that a lot, but it's definitely a good idea, I think.
If you were to talk about the different divisions that there are out there,
Mhm.
what are the ones that you enjoy the most prepping a client towards?
Well, if you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said men's physique is my favorite and figure. Right now, I really, really, really love wellness. I think wellness is just a great, great division. The complexities of it for training, I think are fun for me because you're having to deal with atrophying an upper body and creating hypertrophy in the lower body. And there's a fine balance to what is too much upper body training, what is not enough upper body training, and then vice versa to the legs. And then obviously there's a lot of movements that are great for the legs that the upper body will still grow from. So I do have a lot of fun as a coach working with wellness. Wellness is also just growing at such a fast rate that, it's a fascinating division to me. So I think right now I'd say that's probably my number one favorite. Bikini is very different from federation to federation. So IFBB bikini, NPC bikini, I generally quite enjoy. I'm enjoying the fact that it's becoming a little bit more muscular now. And the reason that I enjoy that is the less muscular a division is, the more you have to rely on genetic structure because you can't build around it too much. And IFBB in the last sort of 4 or 5 years in bikini is starting to become more muscular. So I think, there's a lot of athletes that maybe were going to struggle in it due to genetic potential. That now that it's getting bigger, they have a much better chance of doing well in it because they're allowing them to grow a little bit more muscle and create that shape. So I've been enjoying NPC/IFBB bikini, but again, I've always got a love for men's physique and I've always got a love for women's figure. So I'd say those four are definitely my top four. I've also done quite well in figure in the past, so I think that might have something to do with it as well. But yeah, I'd say those are probably my top four divisions that I enjoy personally as a coach.
Based on that, is for you picking strategies, like is the picking all the same across all divisions, or is it very different if you talk about men's physique versus figure versus wellness, for example?
Yeah, look, I think obviously there's very, very different criterias, the way you have to train them, the level of conditioning that they have to get to. All of those things are going to be pretty drastically different. So, and again, they all have a genetic component to it as well. So I think when we're looking at the athletes, we first have to look at their genetic structure to see which one they would probably suit best, their level of muscle mass that they have currently, like what would be the needs to get into a specific division. I tend to tell clients, I'd say, look, I think, you're where you'll be best at will be in this division. But if a client wants to do, they really enjoy a different division, so be it. It might be a longer process to get them to their best for that division. But then again, I'll always sort of say to a client, like, if we're trying to push you as far as we can within the sport, I think this will be structurally the division that you'll have to be in. So they all have big differences. The person's gonna be really dependent upon it on how their structure is built. But I think, knowing how lean they have to get, how much muscle mass they have to have, the balance of muscle they have to have from across their body to suit the division, it is significantly different from, classic physique to men's physique to wellness to bikini, and then so forth.
Okay. Now let's move to true and false, which is a nice, interesting section. So the first one is intensity of bodybuilding during a contest prep can be balanced with mental and emotional well-being. True or false?
Am I only allowed to say true or false?
You can say
Can I
whatever you
elaborate?
want.
Okay, can I elaborate?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I don't know if it can be balanced, but it can definitely be made easier.
Hmm.
So would you say that's true or false?
In my experience and what
Yeah.
I did,
What do you think?
I agree with you. I think it is a hard one to say that you're gonna have 100% balance, and I think it gets harder and harder the closer you get to like the closer you get to jump on stage, probably from 12 weeks out, 12 to 8 weeks out, balance becomes a harder word to
Mm,
actually use.
yeah.
Is but I guess it just depends on the state of your lifestyle and
Mhm.
how many factors are contributing to or in your favor. So
Yeah.
it depends a lot on also like in your current situation, your current lifestyle. It's not going to be the same if you're prepping and you also have kids and you also have like a lot of other responsibilities. You're a business owner versus someone who is just an athlete who is prepping and has their life a little bit more easier, like to push them to do what they need to do.
Agreed. I would also say that the less conditioned, like the requirement for the division, the less conditioned the requirement, probably the more true that statement is.
Yeah,
And I think if you are, in having to do bodybuilding, where you have to be or figure where you have to be very, 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 very conditioned, I think it's probably less true because to get to that level of conditioning is a lot harder than potentially what it could be for some of the divisions that don't require quite as much conditioning.
true.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it could be both depending on the person, but I think the more, yeah, I think the less conditioning and less muscular you have to be, probably the more true it is.
If bodybuilding had no competitive aspect to it, do you think people would still pursue it as intensely as it is?
Yes. At the general level, yes. I don't think maybe at the Olympia level, but I do think I've never met somebody in the world that doesn't want to look better.
Yep.
That person doesn't exist. And I think that would drive people to do it. And it would be more so a case of, they'll push it intensely because they're process driven and they want to get their body as good as humanly possible. I think when you start getting to the Olympia levels where, there's a lot of health aspects that could be obviously the further you have to push sometimes pharmacology, the harder it has to be. I think at the natural level, 100%. And I think for the vast majority, like the 80%, I definitely do. I think people are going to be pushing themselves to get better. I think at the top 20%, probably not so much because I know, they're starting to look at prize money and those sort of things. And I don't think most people, the risk to reward to health maybe wouldn't be there if the competitive stage wasn't there. But I do think, yes, I do think true. I think the vast majority of people would.
When an athlete decides to work really hard to be a professional bodybuilder, to get that pro card, what does that even mean? Like when do you get it? Like what's the benefit of it? Like what makes it different from you to have a pro card or not?
Well, fun conversation, this one. If we're talking in the top 5% in the world, you can make a living off of prize money and sponsorships.
Mm,
100%. Absolutely, you can. Outside of that, it just allows you, it's a process to compete against, like it's a ladder. It allows you to take a stepping stone in a ladder. It's like, going from only doing novice to doing open. It's going to allow you to, again, be part of the process where you're able to almost like unlock a new level.
mm,
So, but the process isn't going to change. I think once you get to the top 5%, then you can start being more strategic with shows because you're at the top 5%, it's their full-time job. For 95% of people, bodybuilding is not a full-time job. So I think, when you do hit that top percent, it is about prize money and picking the right shows and whatnot. And it's obviously going to have a huge effect on people's lives. But for the majority of people, it's a hobby.
Mm.
And I think, if you have a pro card, it will obviously allow you to do more shows. It will be great. It can be great for business and it can be great for marketing as well. All of those sort of things. And so there's definitely a lot of benefits to it. However, I think for the vast majority of people, the process of getting better is exactly the same. It's just you're standing on a stage with other people that have won pro shows as well. And it just allows you to, I guess, be at the bottom of the barrel again and have to work to get to a brand new level, which I think is a good thing for helping people reach their full potential. Whereas if you're used to winning in amateur shows, going into the pro shows can sort of start you at the bottom again, where you have to now you're up against new levels of competition. So it's going to force you to be better within yourself to be able to be competitive with these people and then win against these people. So I think, it does have that merit to it. But outside of that, in terms of like for vast majority of bodybuilders, I don't think it does make a great deal of difference other than those sort of factors.
I agree. Now, another question that I had for you, true or false, is majority of competitors are unable to maintain a healthy balance outside of their comp prep in their off season. True or false?
I'm gonna say, wow, there's so many contexts to this question. That's a hard one.
You could say it depends.
Yeah, it does depend. Like I think first of all, we got to talk about what is balance because balance for a bodybuilder is going to look very different to a balance for a general population person. Like
Mm-hmm.
balance for some people is making sure they do 3 walks a week, but then no issues and putting value on going out for dinner and drinking with friends and being social after work. And for some people, that's balance. That wouldn't be balance for a bodybuilder. A balance for bodybuilder would be probably 95% of their life is tracked calories, training with progressive overload, and sleeping 8 hours a night. And then, having 5% to go out and maybe, here and there have going out for a few drinks and dinner and whatnot. So everybody's, I guess, idea of balance is different. But there's that concept. Whereas I think if you look at it in that way, I think a lot of people find what their own balance is. So I would say false. But in saying that, there's also a lot of bodybuilders that struggle in their off season with motivation because the show might be so far away or they hate putting on body fat or any of those sort of things. And then they battle, they want to just, do whatever they want in the off season and have fun. And then, oh, prep's on now, 16 weeks out. Now I got to be 100%. And I would say in that situation, definitely true. So I think that one could be both. So I think that would be an it depends answer. But I think you probably see more people in the true section now than the false section because I think bodybuilding is evolving in the amateurs a lot more and people are starting to take it, a lot more serious and be smarter with it than they used to be. So I think, people are getting better at finding the balance. But I think, the more their balance revolves around bodybuilding, the better they become as an athlete.
That's awesome. Now, overrated, underrated, thinking about meal prep and program exercises, are they a necessity for long-term fitness success? So is it overrated, underrated? The fact that there is needed meal prep and program exercises very specific for that. Maybe if we're thinking about bodybuilding versus just general population.
I think for general population, it's overrated, definitely. And I think it's overrated because I think the vast majority of people don't, people love to trash the physical activity guidelines that we have here in Australia, but 95% of people don't meet them. So
Mm,
I think it's we got to set a lower barrier than meal prep and program training. I think if we just get people more active and eating more micronutrient foods, I think we would see, the obesity rate come down a fair bit in people that are sort of just, you know, all or nothing. And, I'm going to train really hard for 3 weeks and then, oh, my motivation's gone. I'm done. And then they just go off the wagon. Whereas I think if we have more general population people that just try to focus on those smaller things, we'd see far better results for the general population. So I think that to me is overrated. I think for competitive bodybuilders and sports athletes, I think meal prep, are we talking like making meals for the whole week?
Meal prep in general. I guess it just depends on each individual
Yeah.
what is to you meal prepping, but I guess just making sure you're doing everything yourself.
Yeah, I think that's probably underrated
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's a lot of people like the sport is bodybuilding, and I'll touch more on the training because I think that's where a lot of people are actually let down rather than the nutrition. I think with um, people's education around macros now, I think there's a lot of people that are still quite good with that, but their letdown is they go into a surplus and then they gain body fat without gaining muscle because they're randomly training and training off emotion, as I like to say, which is if I feel good, then I'll push it really hard, but then I might have a couple of weeks where I'm not training well, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired, and I'm just training to how I feel, and you might get a month of zero progress or going backwards. And then if you're in a surplus and we're not gaining muscle and just gaining fat, then we're going to end up in some trouble. So I think the training aspect of progressive overload is very underrated, and I think a lot of athletes would, by tracking their training, would see substantially more results and manage their body composition better by doing that than they would just sort of training off of emotion. So I think that's the training side of it's definitely underrated. I think people are better at nutrition than what we think, especially in
Yeah.
that world. I think the training is an area that needs to be, especially with online, and I'm going to go on a tangent here, I apologize, but especially with like online coaching, I think we're not seeing a lot of how the athletes are training. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement on athlete technique and intensity that, we're leaving a lot of results on the table with the online training. And it's another reason why I still do in-person training because I absolutely love it. But you can also, the people that I train in person regularly generally see substantially better results. And I think that, that goes across all demographics as well. So I think, the training is a huge, huge, huge aspect that we've gotten good with macros. We've gotten good, with nutrition and understanding phasic, periodization for nutrition. But I think training wise, there's a lot of people that are great, but there's also a lot of people that are not seeing the results that they want because their output and their training intensities aren't at a point that they're able to build muscle and manage their body composition when they're in surpluses.
I do have an interesting question about post diet. And I guess what is your standpoint or your stance on the implementation of recovery diet
Mm.
versus just using reverse dieting, or even thinking one step ahead, a combination or a hybrid between the two of these?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, reverse dieting, I don't think reverse dieting has a lot to do with bodybuilding personally. So for me, I look at post-show, a lot of our hormones are down-regulated, where body's not working nearly as well at, that low body fat levels, energy, lifestyle, everything is down. The idea of bodybuilding is to not stay that lean. Like it's a get in and get out job. So for me personally, what I do is I have people diet down, get them show ready, and I try to get the calories right back up to maintenance as fast as humanly possible. It's not the specific rule, but like a guideline is like sort of like 10% weight up in like 6 weeks around that mark. And then our goal is post show is to get them as quick as possible to a point where we can grow muscle and we're feeling good again. Like we're in a healthy position again. Reverse dieting for me, I've always used it in the sense of we have a general population individual that's 35 to 40 kilos overweight. We have dieted them down and they've lost 10 kilos. They need to lose another 20. We're hitting a point where they can't sustainably continue to diet, but we still have ample amounts of body fat. I would then reverse diet in that scenario to re-diet again. So that's just about the only time I would actually use reverse dieting, and I think it's very effective in that sense. Just for me, like the only time I could see it being used, or I have used it in bodybuilding, is if we have a show in 6 weeks and we've already hit the condition. I could make an argument for using it there, or we're in great condition and we have another show in 4 weeks. might be some great merit to use there when we're still trying to keep the person relatively lean. And then we can do it for a few weeks and then maybe re-diet or whatever we need to do. But for the most part, I look in bodybuilding at recovery diets. It is a get in and get out job. Everybody knows that you can't stay that sustainably lean. It's not good for you. So for me, I try to get the calories back to maintenance as soon as humanly possible, because if we don't, reverse dieting is still dieting.
Yeah.
So, if we've done a 20-week diet into a show, we have zero need to diet. So I think the only merit to reverse dieting out of a show, like people do it, is because they want to stay looking like they're stage lean all the time, which we know is not a great thing to do. So for me personally, that's how I've always viewed it. And I do use reverse dieting pretty regularly in general population in those scenarios where we're maybe drop 10 or 12% body weight and they're starting to struggle a little bit, but we need to keep going. So we'll just pull the calories back. We'll reverse diet and try to minimize how much fat we put on so that we can re-diet them again and get them closer to their goal. So I think that's about the only time I personally use it. But yeah, I think it has its merit. I think it's just not in bodybuilding a lot of the time.
What would be the biggest red flags for you to not coach a client to a stage?
So I sort of have a list, and I use it's probably one of my most popular Instagram posts that I've ever had is a checklist for bodybuilding. So we need to go through their current lifestyle behaviors. Lots of things on that list aren't sorted, financially, stability at home, stability at work, those sort of things. Then there are areas where I'll say that needs to be fixed. But if I'm gonna say a red flag. Like those things are, people can be great with their habits and just have instability in those areas. So it's probably better to fix them. A red flag, which makes me say absolutely hell no, would be if you can't string 20 weeks together of a diet and a training program with progressive overload. Like if you don't, if you need a show to be compliant, that's a red flag to me. And I always sort of say there's a large difference between bodybuilding and competitive bodybuilding. And if you can't be a bodybuilder without a show date, then if you need a show date to be adherent, that's a red flag to me straight off the bat. Like this has to be a lifestyle more so than not before you can even consider doing it competitively. Like you can't not know how to drive a car and then try to enter a car race.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you need to learn the habits and skills of the sport before you can competitively do it. So I think for me, that's the biggest red flag that is still relatively common these days.
Is there any other red flags that you would be looking into?
Red flags.
Like eating disorders, maybe an unhealthy body image,
Oh yeah.
or maybe something to do with their, I don't know, overall approach to using PEDs or supplements or stuff like that. Is there anything along those lines that you would look
Every
at
one of
and
those you
say,
said is perfect.
yeah,
Absolutely every one of those you said is perfect. I think when we're dealing with, there's a lot of people that deal with body image issues and it may not be an issue while they're prepping because they're getting leaner, so they're very happy.
yeah,
Where the issue arises is post-show.
mm,
Downregulate all your hormones, prepping for a show. You get to a certain point, you get a lot of attention on social media. People are really proud of you, excited. That dopamine starts to hitting. And then, post show, it kind of goes away a little bit. And then people, start correlating how they look with compliments and things like that. And then all of a sudden you get to a point where it's like they're trying to stay lean all the time because they want social media attention or whatnot, and those are things that are red flags for sure. You're definitely 100% right with that. In terms of the PEDs, one of the red flags, people that talk about PEDs before they talk about lifestyle training and nutrition is definitely a big one. There's a lot of athletes that are more concerned about what dosage of drugs they should be using, and they're very trigger happy on drugs. But, when you try to pull them back and say, look, that's something that you put in the background when everything else is working perfect. It's only going to enhance what you're doing, and if the things that you're got put in place to help you grow muscle first aren't working, the enhancements may still work, but they're going to be far less effective, and your health risks are going to increase because you're probably going to need to use more enhancements, which, most people are happy to do in the first place. So I think when your priority and focus is on enhancements over training, lifestyle, and diet, then I think that's probably a red flag. Well, it's not probably, it is a red flag too. So
Yeah.
there's very good points that you just brought up there. So I should have asked you that question. You had a better answer than I did.
I think one of the things that worries me, as you mentioned, is the closer you get to show, the more restrictive your diet can get. And obviously, the amount of calories, the energy availability, the overtraining, fatigue, like lack of recovery, stress, making sure that you are actually going to be on point and on time for the show. It's like there's so many different things that can trigger that or enhance that vulnerability in the athlete, that can get to a point where the client is very vulnerable to just slide into a very slippery slope of binging, purging, especially if they know that something can take them out of shape or take them backwards, but they're also not feeling great. They're also starving. How do you manage that situation in a client that is 6 weeks out and
Mm.
is in this like emotional slippery slope, slide, like really delicate situation?
Yeah, I think it becomes a case of, first of all, natural bodybuilding is one of the healthiest things you can do, except for contest prep. So a lot of people end up in that situation. I do think, though, however, timing of your prep phases makes a big difference. I think, when you are prepping athletes, if you manage the timelines of their diet well, you can have factors in for refeeds, and there could be, 2 to 3 days, a week or fortnight of higher calories. And then that gives them something to look forward to from a psychological point of view, but also from a physiological point of view. It will help with their energy availability and whatnot. So I think one of the first things, like, people can be quick to look at it and say, oh, they're feeling like they're having to binge and yada yada the calorie. And it's like, if you can get the phasing of the training right, you can make it significantly easier for the athlete from a coach's point of view. So I think that's the first thing that's very, very, very important. And then secondly, you just have to, you have to have a good line of communication with the client. And I think the client also has to have a good line of communication, because sometimes, and I've had plenty of situations in the past where I will give in refeeds where I don't think they may physiologically need it, but I know if I don't, then it's going to turn into absolute carnage. So it's sort of going to be okay, let's give them a little bit more food because that's going to prevent a lot of food later. So I think those sort of situations, like if you're in a situation like that, I think those sort of things can be helpful. But I think open communication, just knowing the athlete and just, listening to the way they're talking and what they're saying. And sometimes you can read between the lines on how they're going with those sort of things. But yeah, look, I think probably one of the things that's spoken about least is people should be phasing the training and diet right, to the point where the diet won't be easy, but you're making it as efficient as possible. Where, we're planning to have, for example, you could have they have to lose 10 kilos in 20 weeks. We're looking at 500 grams a week. We could say, all right, every 3 weeks, I want to add in a refeed. So I'm going to start the prep at 23 weeks. I want peak.
Mm.
So I'm going to start it at 24. Maybe I want a couple more peak, maybe a couple weeks just in case things go wrong. So I'm going to start it at 26, rather than looking at saying, oh crap, we're running out of time here. We really got to push. And then, that's when you generally start running into those issues. You're going to find that, if you have 26 weeks and you're still trying to lose 500 grams per week, you're going to usually be ahead of time. And, you can implement refeeds so that they're not actually going to get into that environment themselves. So I think the setting up of the diet is going to be one of the most important things that you're going to look at there, that probably people don't talk about because it's a preventative issue rather than a reactive issue. That I think a lot of people look at it as a reactive issue. And it's like there's a lot of things coaches can do, and great coaches generally don't deal with that as much with clients because they do the preventative work. They get them into a position lifestyle wise that they're ready to diet, that their body composition isn't too high leading into the prep so that it's not going to be, as drastic of a diet for them. And I think that's the number one thing that you need to look at. But then, you are always sometimes going to have those situations where it does get tougher and being able to, again, be preventative rather than reactive, I think is the best way to go as a coach.
I agree with you totally. It's been a pleasure to have you, and it's been great to listen to all the things that you had to say about all these answers and these questions that I had for you. Where can people find you, and is there anything exciting coming up for you?
Yeah, so if you want to reach out or you want to, follow on, I post a lot on social media. I do a lot of content daily, actually. So that's Richard_physique code on Instagram, and then our work page where we have our whole team where we're posting results and keeping up to date with what the competitors and athletes are doing that's just at physique code. And then my personal account where I post a lot of my content is Richard_physique code on Instagram. In terms of what we're doing, I'm traveling this season around Australia, so I usually open up bookings in every state that I go to. If people want to do consults or they want to go in and do any one-on-one training. So if anybody is anywhere in Australia, in the next sort of 8-ish weeks, I'll be traveling around, and if anybody wants to come book in, then we can do that. But outside of that, it's all business and making sure clients are hitting their full potential.
That's awesome. Hey, Richard, thank you so much for coming.
Thank
I
you for having me.
appreciate you, and I am looking forward to releasing this episode very soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.